So there was an interesting conversation between Trump, Zelensky, and JD Vance yesterday, and I believe that most of these people that are posting their opinions all over social media don't actually care about the interaction yesterday nearly as much as they claim. And the reason that I say that is because I can guarantee you a majority, a large majority, I'm talking like if I had to guess, I would say 98% of people that are sharing their opinions about this on social media did not take the 45 minutes or however long it was to watch the entire thing. I saw one video on YouTube, it was like 49 minutes long. And in my opinion, if you can't spend 45 minutes to 49 minutes to watch the entire interview, the entire conversation, then you actually don't care that much. And I say that because I used to be somebody that did the same thing. I would see some 60-second Instagram reel that didn't paint the entire picture of what actually happened, that was coming from a biased source. And I would spout off on some childish fucking opinion about it on social media, and I would get ripped apart in the comments. And now looking back at it, rightfully so. Like I deserve that ridicule because I did not do my due diligence to make sure that my opinion was fully formed based on all of the information before I did that. And that's why I stopped talking about politics and everything. And that's the other thing. This is not a political discussion. We're not talking about politics. We're talking about human beings and the interaction and forming opinions based on. So don't get blinded by your bias against Trump and Zelensky, or Trump or Zelensky or JD Vance. That's not the point of this conversation. So that was a long-winded belief there, Josh. How do you feel about what I just said?
I feel like media is capable of creating our own reality in that they can take a 5-minute clip, they can run with a story, they can run with their own opinions, they can run with, left leaning, right leaning, more centrist view of whatever took place in that conversation. And then society as a whole just goes fucking wild.
Mm-hmm.
Just social media goes wild. All these stories get filled up with hundreds, if not thousands, of comments from people just outraged on one side or the other based on a 5-minute clip.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. I think that's where our society is at right now, is we have low attention span, in the big scheme of things, low information, but we are full of opinions. We are extremely high on opinions, and that mixture just does not make sense.
Yeah.
That's what we've seen yesterday, is people are just going crazy over a 5-minute clip. And to your point, I don't know that anybody watched beyond that 5-minute clip.
No. I mean, I saw, so what made me think of this was I saw one person. So I'm on a Facebook group, or I'm part of a Facebook group called Kingdom of Kyle. So everybody in there is named Kyle. And for some reason it has gotten very political. Both sides. Like there's some Kyles are liberals, some Kyles are conservative. But somebody posted something about the whole thing. I think it was a meme. It was like a picture of Zelensky, but he was like his head on a little boy's body sitting in a chair. And I'm reading through the comments, and one guy said, "Did you take the time to watch the entire interview?" He's like, "Because I did. I watched it start to finish, and here is what I saw." And basically what he was saying, and again, this is just his opinion. I didn't watch the whole thing. I don't have time to. I really don't give a shit about it. But he said that in his opinion, and he worded it very well, like he wasn't trying to like force anybody to get to, to change their opinion on it. But that apparently, according to him, Zelensky basically like triggered that whole thing. Like he was being rude and disrespectful. And that's when JD Vance stepped in and got heated a bit. But again, like I didn't watch it. I don't know if that's the case. But either way, it made me think of this. I'm like, there are so many people so outraged, like you said, that claim they care about this, but they didn't care enough to sacrifice not even 45 minutes. Because think about it, you could go on YouTube and you could watch the whole thing at 1.5 speed, and you can save yourself 15 minutes or whatever. So you can watch the whole thing in 30 fucking minutes. You don't care enough to do that. You just want you want to satisfy your own ego, and you want to share this opinion because it makes you feel like you're doing something, when in reality you're not doing shit other than playing into the division that already exists in this country, and fueling the fucking flames and wasting your own time and energy on shit that you have no fucking control over. And it's just, again, this is my opinion, because I used to do the same thing, and I look back to how fucking miserable I was in that time. You remember over the summer, man, like when I was struggling for a little while, and I looked back, and it was that was it, as I was focusing too much of my time, energy, and effort on politics, yet not enough of my time, energy, and effort on politics in order to form a true opinion on what was going on. I was forming it off bullshit. And I think, imagine what the world would look like. Imagine how happy we would be as individuals, and maybe how less divisive we would be if we focused as much on ourselves and becoming the best version of spirituality, personal development, personal growth, and stopped feeding into the bullshit. And then maybe we could realize that 98% of the time we agree on most things, and we could actually come together and actually make a difference on all of that stuff. But it's never going to work the way that it's intended. And I think that's the point, and they're fucking winning, right? Like, the media is winning. The elites, the 1% that everybody claims to hate, they're fucking winning, because we just keep playing the game and forget that we have the power to stop playing the game. That was a lot.
Yeah, no, we do have the power to stop, and they are winning. We're like heroin addicts.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff. So long as they, and look, media knows exactly what they're doing. They're in the business of gaining attention.
Ratings. They got to get the ratings, baby.
And so what are they going to do? Post something that's seemingly boring? No.
And unifying? God forbid.
They're going to post at all times the worst possible view, the worst possible piece of an interview or meeting or car accident or whatever. I mean, for instance, I live in Metro Detroit, and I get like a Metro Detroit news update, to my email on a daily basis. I had to unsubscribe from it because I would no longer, click on it and read the articles. The headlines that would always pop up is somebody got killed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
well, it is Detroit.
Yeah. No, it is, but it's like I see the game now.
Yeah.
Like they're doing it for attention, and it's negative attention. Like we need to be focusing on more positive aspects of our lives, and not be subject to the manipulation of media. So media largely, and I've heard people debate this and say that this isn't accurate in the past, which I don't understand. But media, generally speaking, is owned by left-leaning individuals.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to Trump, of course they're going to pick out the worst parts and not give you any background to anything that happened before and after.
Right.
I get it. So we as a society we're being manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wake up to that fact.
Yeah, and it goes both ways. Yeah, it goes both ways, because you do. I agree. Like, I believe that most of them are left leaning, but it also goes both ways, because you can say the same thing about Fox News on the other side.
We're being manipulated on both sides,
right?
But just the overwhelming amount of media that's out there is left leaning,
for sure.
And so it's going to be slanted towards everything that Trump does is just absolutely awful, and he's a Nazi, and he's this and that, and the things that they accuse him of, it's totally clickbait. I mean, there's no basis in reality in a lot of these things that they say, and I don't know if we don't understand, we don't care, we're just too wrapped up in our own heads and our reactions that we don't stop to realize that we're being manipulated. But it is happening hardcore on a daily basis, and it makes me think back to like pre-2000.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know when people actually sitting down at their kitchen table and reading a newspaper front to back, when that actually like stopped or when it started to slow down. But two things happened at that point. One, we were more informed, and two, for the most part, it wasn't perfect, but for the most part, we had a little bit more objective news sources reporting to us.
Did we
And
though? Did we? So here's my
well, more
question.
than now. I'm not saying it was perfect, but more than now.
But did we? Like I think that's a good point, but I think about this a lot. Did we have less bias in the media, or were we just unaware of it? Because
I think
now,
both.
yeah, I think you're right. Like I personally think you're right. I think at one point in time, like fuck, I don't know. So I'm reading a book right now on the Revolutionary War. So it's taking you from the before the war even started to what led up to the war, all the way through the end of the Revolutionary War. And it's a 3-book series. And the first book that I'm reading, this thing's freaking fat, and it's little tiny typing, and it's in 1775 fucking language. And I have to read it very slowly. But it's interesting because even back then, through newspapers and pamphlets and stuff like that, there was manipulation going on through the media at that point in
Yeah,
time. So it's
I
been
get it.
happening since the dawn of time. Like it happened in ancient Rome and Egypt and all of this stuff because they were manipulating people to think the emperor was a good guy or whatever. But yes, to your point, I think it was less so. And it was complicated because we didn't have access to as much information back then
Yeah,
to do our
yeah.
own research and to have conversations with other people and all of that stuff. So I think it was a little bit of both.
I mean, I'm telling you now,
Yeah,
just
how was it back in the day, Grandpa?
I mean, just with the way my own brain works, I can't handle too much information. I short circuit. I go into overload,
It's
and so
we're not wired to handle all that information.
yeah,
We're human beings. We don't evolve nearly as fast as technology. I saw a meme the other day. I think we might have talked about this last week, but it was like me trying to process all of this information with a brain that's still hardwired to like hunt and gather berries or something like that. And that's so true.
yeah. So the um, shoot, I lost my train of thought on this.
Sorry, did I get you distracted
Um,
with the berries?
but yeah. So the other thing that it makes me think of is just without this barrage of information coming at you. I mean, in your palm, in your hand, having 5,000 news sources, clips of 5,000 news sources, not
Yeah.
total articles, but clips of 5,000 news articles that you theoretically, if you're just wasting your time for an hour, you can go through 100. You can go through maybe even more. Like you can't do that if you are actually reading full articles
Yeah.
like it was prior to 2000 when people would sit down
I
and
see what
read
you're
a
saying.
newspaper.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, since we didn't have like the immediate knowledge of other people's opinions within comments below the articles on social media, and we just read the newspaper, I think that we had more of a possibility to process the information ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and to sit with those thoughts and think for ourselves, what does this mean for me?
Great
And now
point.
we're in this like tribe mentality, and news has become, to be honest, I view it as a very poor, cheap entertainment source. I'm not calling it entertainment. I think what it's moved to is more entertainment than actual news.
Yeah,
And
it gets an emotional response, which is what entertainment is meant to do, right? You watch a movie, a drama, it makes you sad. You watch a comedy, it makes you laugh. Like the media and social media, it's all built around this because it's human psychology. Is it's trying to trigger you in some way, like, and don't think I mean triggered like the picture of the blue-haired liberal with the septic piercing, like screaming. That's not what I mean. It's meant to trigger some sort of emotional response. Otherwise, if it doesn't, you're not going to fucking read it. I mean, that's plain and simple. So it's intentional for sure, and that's the way the algorithm works. And that's the dangerous part about social media is it is programmed to trigger that dopamine, especially, and it is a true addiction.
You know who I blame for all of this? All
Steve
of the
Jobs.
media issues, the direction that our society is going in,
Trump.
the attention span, and
It's definitely
no,
Trump. Obama.
Jerry Springer.
Jerry. Oh, damn. R.I.P. Jerry. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Jerry, came out with the show and it was wild and you didn't know what was going to happen and you needed to watch it because something crazy was going to happen. And
Yeah.
like news has gone in that same direction.
The
Like
shock
post the
value.
wildest shit that you can't look away because it's going to be a heavy hitting, emotional, outrage filled article that they're going to post. I
Yeah.
mean, the news is taking Jerry Springer's playbook.
Yeah. That's a great point. An Ohio guy, by the way.
Yeah.
So I agree with it. And that's where like I had that realization was it? No, it was shit. It was earlier this week. It was Tuesday. I've been guilty of that. And when it comes to especially the short form content, my I think it's dopamine, right? Like I'm like, oh, I want to get a bunch of comments and views and likes and all this shit. So I would and at the same time, so my monkey brain on that side is, getting fueled from that. And then I have people who I respect greatly and who are very good at what they do when it comes to personal branding and social media content and how to drive engagement and all of those things. I have all of this, so their voice coming in here, all the voices from the content and the comments and everything coming in here. And what happened was I stopped being authentic, right? Like, I mean, it wasn't that I was saying things that I necessarily didn't believe. It was just I was intentionally trying to fucking be divisive in order to trigger that emotional response in people. But it's like, we don't need more of that. We need less of that. We need more people on social media and in the media and just in the world in general showing up authentically. And what got me to that realization was I wrote about this in my newsletter this week, but I was having my daily conversation with God, and I always get sidetracked, right? That's how my brain works. I wander into, and a lot of it goes back to content, and because that's kind of like one of my creative outlets. So my brain goes down this, and I basically, one of the things I ask him for every day is to continue to love and guide me on my journey to becoming the best man that I possibly can be. And that question led me to, well, why do I, if that's my goal to becoming the best man that I possibly can be, then why do I keep driving this division? How does that align with becoming the best man that I can be? And then I asked myself a question from that. Do I show up on social media for people the same way that I show up for my friends and family in person, especially like my friends in GoBundance? Because those are, typically very deep conversations. We're trying to serve each other. We're trying to help each other. And the answer was just fucking no, like plain fuck no. That's not the guy that I show up for you and for Callie and for Lena and Jamie and everybody else in that community and my friends at home and my parents. That's not, I would never approach a conversation with them, with you, like I do in this short form content. And I'm not being authentic. So I need to get back to being me. And that is how I think that's just how we can spread positivity. But what's frustrating with that, and what most people get sucked into, and why they don't end up being successful from a positivity standpoint when it comes to social media, is it doesn't get the attention because the algorithm doesn't work that way. So it's like, then you get caught up in this brain fuck of like, I want to show up that way, but the dopamine isn't getting fulfilled by doing that. So now I'm going to be divisive, and I'm like, I'm done with this shit. Like, I don't give a fuck if it gets 3 views or 10,000 views. If it's real and if it's authentic, and if I'm trying to show up the way that I do for my friends and family in real life, then I'm good with it. And I trust that by doing that and consistently doing that, eventually I'm going to reach the right people and it's all going to work out. So I think we need to do more of that. But it's hard. Like, that's an uphill battle. So I get it.
It is. It's another form of manipulation, and I feel like it has that form of manipulation has trickled down from what media is orchestrating in what they want us to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And it's, it's trickling down to, people like you who are posting content and thinking that, well, the only way I'm going to get views is if I just play their game.
Yeah.
And so you're being manipulated. So is the audience, all the way down the chain.
Yeah. And I agreed. And that's another way that the quote unquote they are winning. I also think they're winning in another regard because, all right, I thought about this after I said what I said about the whole Trump and Zelensky thing, and that post that I made this morning is already blown up. Like, it's been shared not a bunch of times, but it's been shared. It's got a ton of comments and everything. And my whole point of that was I don't care enough to spend 45 minutes of my life watching the entire fucking thing, and that in itself is another way that they're winning, because I'm so busy with everything else going on in my life, with trying to pay my fucking bills and stay fit and be a good husband and run a business and work 2 part-time jobs and all of this other shit that we have to worry about in modern life, that I don't have fucking time personally. I don't have the care to subject myself to that. Those 45 minutes, in my opinion, or 30 minutes if I listen to it at 1.5 speed, are better used elsewhere in my own personal life. Now, that's also a problem because then the government is free to get away with whatever they want. But here's my other thing is, what's the point of educating myself and consuming all of that bullshit if I'm not going to do anything with it? If I'm just going to consume it and then bitch and moan about it on social media, that's not actually doing anything either. But so, like, my point is, if you're going to consume it and you're not actually going to use it to take any form of any form of action, I was going to say sort and form and it came out storm, then what's the fucking point? Like, what's the point? And maybe that's the wrong answer, because maybe that is allowing them to win as well. But my personal opinion is, when it gets to the point, and at some point it will, it's the cycle of history. It's never been defeated. It will reach a breaking point, and then at some point we will be forced to take action. Maybe there are people out there that is their personal mission, is to prevent it from getting that far. That's awesome. Respect to you. Like, live your purpose, but that's not my purpose. Like, my purpose is what you and I are doing, with trying to have more positive conversations, with the land business that we're building, like with our families and all of these different things. That's my purpose. I don't have time to distract myself from that. So when shit hits the fan, if shit hits the fan, hopefully it doesn't, I'll be there at that point in time. And that, maybe that's again, like, some people are going to tell me that's the wrong view and belief, but honestly, I don't care. I don't care about your opinion. I'm going to live my life the way that I want to.
Yeah. I, from one of the 5-minute clips that I watched of yesterday, and I can't remember the news source, so I assume it was a left-leaning source. I was just looking for a video, not necessarily a video from a preferred political-leaning news source.
Yeah.
But the clip that I saw, it seemed like Zelensky was just explaining the history of the conflict. And out of nowhere, somebody asked him, do you own a suit? Which is just a dumb fuck comment to make. Dude, come on. And I feel like it's one of those things that are just, again, pandering to the media.
Yeah. I saw something about that. Like, he got out of the limo or whatever, and Trump said something. He made some smart ass comment to him about it, the way that he's like, "Oh, I see you dressed up for it," or something like that. Yeah. He's wearing a tracksuit.
But then Trump at one point said something to the effect of, "All right, now I'm going to talk. You've talked too much." And then Vance, I don't know. Based on the view that was posted, It and this was probably done on purpose, but it made Vance look like he was also pandering to the media
Mm-hmm.
in saying, how dare you act like this in front of in this respected
That's the
law
one that I saw.
and and in front of American media. And like, I don't know, and maybe there was a good reason for that. I'm one to tend to not even give a shit about any of that kind of stuff, and I would just deal with the issue at hand. But it seemed like it was almost like a performance a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
in saying that in kind of like a high and mighty, type opinion in front of the cameras, and it was going to be posted all over media and news sources and social media and all that. So the clip I did see, I I get it why people would be outraged, but just purely from an automatic reactionary standpoint, I feel like, again, if you're going to get that outraged and you're going to go on a public forum and start spouting off, like, maybe before you do that, going back to what you mentioned before, watch the whole thing
Yeah.
so you have a better informed opinion. And unfortunately, these people are not doing that these days.
Yeah. Or don't, and just shut up. Like, if you don't
I
want to
know.
spend the time, like, just shut up. That's where I was at. Like, I mean, I was really thinking about this yesterday, and I'm like, I'm like, I don't care enough to go watch the whole thing. So I'm just not gonna talk about it until that post today. But again, like, my post had nothing to do with the conversation itself. It had nothing to do with politics. It was simply like, hey, if you're not gonna you don't care about it as much as you claim, if you aren't going to sacrifice or invest, I guess I should say, the 40 whatever minutes of your time to watch the whole thing. So just shut up. Like, you're going to save yourself so much pain and suffering if you just shut up. Um and then it's so funny, like, I just it blows my mind how people cannot, like, and I thought that post that I made was pretty fucking clear and very, like, and I'm not trying to toot my horn, but I thought it was very fucking well put. And then I have people in the comments that are like commenting on things that are completely irrelevant to what I said. They want to get political, and I'm like, you're missing read the words, like, and if you don't understand it, ask me a fucking question instead of making some dumbass fucking comment that makes you look like a fucking idiot, because it's completely irrelevant to what I said. It's just you're oh man, it's just like, I don't know. Human behavior is so complicated, and that's definitely part of the problem, right? Like, we are very good at taking simple things and completely fucking them up.
Yeah. Um, I I feel like people, when they read something, it's almost like today they're so used to being triggered
Yeah.
that when they read something that's benign, they create something out of what they want to see.
And that's the victim mentality. That is the
Yeah.
definition of a victim mentality. You took something and spun it and made yourself a victim of what I said, when it's not even close to it. You created your own fucking problem. And that it takes me back to some of the old content that we've posted, or that I've posted in the past, I should say. And just like, they don't get it, and it's crazy. And once you can break free from that victim mentality, and it's very hard to do, because again, it's human nature. It's a lot easier for me to point the finger and say, well, the reason my life sucks is because Josh fucked it up, and it's a lot harder for me to look in the mirror. And I actually made this point about RFK yesterday, but I got to finish my actual thoughts here. But again, the victim mentality, that's a huge one. And that's where I look at my personal growth and development journey, and I point back. There are different points along the timeline where I can point back to, and I made like a significant change in my life, or I made a significant connection, or I took a significant action that helped me get to where I am now. And of course, I'm still not perfect, but people who know me, who look back at me, and myself included, and I look back at myself 3 or 4 years ago, I'm vastly better than I was back then. So where I point back to the very first thing that started the whole change was reading the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. When I read that book, and I remember reading it back in 2018, and I'm just about done with it now again for the third time. So I read it in 2018. I think I read it again in like 2021, and now again in 2025. My world was fucking blown at that point. You mean like and especially because I was in leadership in the military and in corporate America at that point in time. I'm like, oh, wait a second. Like, oh, it's not my employees' fault. It's my fault. It's not my Joe's fault. It's my fault. It's not my boss's fault. It's all my fault. Like, oh my God. Like, well, this makes a whole lot of sense. And it's an empowering feeling because it makes you focus on the things that you can control. So it forces you to stop playing the victim. Oh, I can't blame my parents for this. I can't blame my spouse for this. I have to take ownership. And what's so cool about it is it improves the relationships in your life, because instead of pointing the finger, when you go into a conversation with your significant other or your boss or your parents or whoever it may be, you take ownership initially, and then you can, typically what happens is like, hey, Josh, like, dude, I must not have explained my intent to you clearly, which is why the actions that you took weren't right. And then typically what happens is you're going to respond with ownership as well. Hey, no, man, that was on me, like, blah, blah, blah. And dude, we just totally diffused the situation and we just had an amazing conversation. So that's where I pivot. Honestly, I would be shocked if fucking Donald Trump or JD Vance have ever read that book. I might be wrong. JD maybe because he was a Marine, but if you can just approach it with that way, and there are a lot of good examples of that throughout our history, like JFK, great example of extreme ownership. That guy owned his shit. Jocko Willink, obviously another one. Like, I would love for Jocko to be the president. Like, I think we would be in a vast, first of all, like, people are definitely not going to fuck around with Jocko as the president, but he is a master of this principle. And like, I look at the conversation between Zelensky, Trump, and Vance yesterday, and I would love to see what it would have happened if it was Zelensky, Jocko Willink, and Leif Babin. So Leif is the co-author of Extreme Ownership and was one of the platoon commanders underneath Jocko during the Battle of Ramadi. I would love to see how that would be different, because I guarantee it would have went a different way.
Yeah, probably. The shoot.
Sorry, that was a long one.
In that.
I know. I got excited because like you brought up that unintentionally. You brought up or maybe intentionally the victim mentality, and it's just like that is eating our society alive.
So what you were talking about in taking ownership of a situation, I feel like somebody does need to step up and be the leader in all situations and take ownership. And I think that makes it easier for the other party to do the same. When all of a sudden they realize that, I mean, just think of the impact of social media that we take out of social media and into our days. On social media, it's entertainment, yes, it's manipulation, yes, it's a whole bunch of other things, but also, if you think about it, it's also a battle. It's like you're going in there to fight somebody else on their own ideas.
You're already like ready to fight as soon as you log on.
And so, people's virtual reality is becoming more of their reality than ever before. And so you go out into, and look, I get it. You're hiding behind a keyboard. There's a different level of confidence that people step into, and all of a sudden they're tough guys or tough girls, and they can spout off and say whatever they want. But I still think that there's some level of battle that people take out of social media and into real life, like road rage incidents, issues with politics is an easy one, out in public or with
Yeah.
family, gatherings or something like that. And so I feel like in something like extreme ownership and that teaching you how to take responsibility for your own actions, your own life, your own reactions, your, whatever it may be. I feel like in some of those situations, just to disarm situations, if somebody were to take ownership of
Yeah.
their side of the issue, I feel like that. So first of all, I think that may confuse people where we are in our society right now, because everything is just like,
Blindside them with, whoa, this person's actually taking responsibility
yeah,
for their
like, what are you
actions.
doing?
I don't know what
Like,
to do.
I just want to fight. What are you
Yeah.
doing? But I feel like that can diffuse and disarm, everyday conversations that I feel like it should be normal for people to take their ownership of their side of the street and what they did, and confusion that they allowed into the situation. But that's not normal these days.
Man, I don't know if, like, honestly, I don't know enough about human history to say if it's ever been normal. And you look at
It's got to be worse now.
it's got to be,
It may
oh, for
not be
sure.
normal, but it's worse,
Oh,
unfortunately.
100%. Well, I think it's worse now because let's rewind the clock. And I'm thinking back to like Native American culture, let's say pre-white man. Like, you're some freaking, 25-year-old Native American guy. You don't really have anywhere. You have to take ownership of your life. Like, if you don't, you're going to die, right? If you don't go out and get your food and connect with God and all that stuff, like, you defend yourself, you practice all those things. But you look, and then you look throughout human history, and it's the extreme version of ownership is the exception to the rule. Like a guy like Marcus Aurelius. And Stoicism is a version of extreme ownership, right? So Stoicism is all based on you and how you respond to things and the things that you do and the actions that you take. And Marcus Aurelius was like one of the prime examples of that. But for every Marcus Aurelius, there's probably 1,000 Donald Trumps who nothing is ever his fault. And again, this is not a political discussion. We have not gotten into political topics. I don't think at all. It's just a fact. Like, that guy does not take ownership. Like, you can listen to all the debates, and everything is everybody else's fault. Everything is Biden's fault or whoever's fault. It's never Donnie's fault. And that kind of leads us into the conversation that hopefully we'll get to next week. But like, that's one of the things I respect so much about RFK. And I think that's going into the examples that he had growing up in his uncle and his father. He does take ownership. You might not agree with everything that he says and that he does, but like, there have been things that have come up about his past, weird shit, right? Like the fucking bear thing, like he hit a bear cub with his car or something and then put it on his roof and dumped it in Central Park. He never denied it. He's like, yeah, I did that. Like,
But also, just for perspective, how old was he when that happened?
yeah, and I mean, who knows at that time too? Like, he might have been in the middle of his heroin addiction, right? Like, which I'm assuming could make you do some crazy shit. I don't know, and that's another thing. He owns his heroin addiction. Like, and what's interesting about that is, think about when he owns those things, how quickly they just fall away from the media, because the media doesn't latch on to him, because they're like, oh shit, well, he's owning it. So it's like a bully, right? It's like a bully. If your bully's making fun of you for being fat and you just start making fun of yourself, well, the bully has no ammo because you're showing him that it doesn't hurt you. Now, that's maybe a bad example, because, go work out and eat healthy is another way to do it. But I think it's the same thing. Like, you kind of disarm the situation by turning it back on yourself. And I think that's, it's kind of a general rule of stoicism and extreme ownership and all of that. It's like, I disarm the situation. I take away the ammo by taking ownership. Like, we talked about this last week. If Trump did that, if he just took ownership, like, that would disarm so many things. And what it would do is it would force people to actually look at things like his policies and the things that he was doing. And again, you might still disagree with those. That's fine. But at least you're disagreeing on an issue versus the way that he said something that wasn't actually super important, you know? So that's my thought.
Yeah. I mean, RFK, he's got a lot of controversial, to the norm, controversial medical health opinions. Yeah, well, some are
I'm going to leave
opinions.
us with something that'll lead us into next week, but go ahead. I like where
Many
you're
of
going.
them are backed by research that people, quite frankly, just don't want to look
Yeah.
at. But from him and his personality, his his the way he presents himself, the way he takes ownership, all that. Yeah, I'm fully behind him. He has a career built on going after corporations for
But he's
doing
not a
stuff
doctor, Josh. He's not a
that
doctor.
that the medical industry is currently doing, that the pharmaceutical company industry is currently doing, that the food industry is currently doing, and so because of that and all of those situations that he's had to go after those companies, you essentially become an expert. You have to become an
You have
expert
to, right?
in those situations to present a case against them.
Successfully litigate against them. Like you have
So
to become an expert and you have to surround yourself with other experts.
yeah, and it's so easy for people not to look at that. And I think it's because of, again, media paints this picture of him as an anti-vaxxer, or he doesn't want people who need SSRIs to have access to SSRIs, blah 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 blah. Like, no, he's coming at it from a holistic, different standpoint. Well, now I'm getting into potentially political territory.
A little, a little, a little.
But the point is that I had a conversation with somebody, and I simply asked, what are your thoughts? I expressed the opinion at first. I'm like, I think RFK is a great pick, a cabinet pick. And I asked this person, what is your thoughts on RFK? And the response was, he's an idiot. I'm like, well, elaborate. Like, what do you mean? And the answer was, he's got a worm in his brain and he buried a bear.
Yeah, yeah. He's also a wildly successful environmental lawyer.
But then as I dug deeper, I'm like, yeah, this was a very sensitive conversation, so I couldn't come out the way I truly wanted to come out. But so I just continued to ask more prodding questions, and I was like, he was an attorney going after corporations for harming people's health and putting pollutants into the rivers and air and all that kind of stuff, and he's a lifelong Democrat. And so I'm like, how did he switch out of favor so quickly?
Right.
And I was like, oh, and by the way, he's a Kennedy. And the response to all that was, well, his family thinks he's a kook.
A lot of people, families think they're fucking kooks.
And so that conversation just really disheartened me, because none of it means anything.
No.
It's all headlines. And it was also, lacking of critical thinking, research, and, just an individual take on, yes, there's all this information out there, but I'm also going to go look over here to see what else he's done, to see if I agree with which side of the equation do I agree with more.
Yeah.
It was almost like the media side was taken in and internalized, and we're like, oh, that's him. And
It's confirmation bias.
there's so much, so many people doing that in our society that it is sad.
Yeah, it's confirmation bias. And I mean, we're all guilty of it, right? Like, typically, if we like someone or we agree with most of their things, we'll put up a wall, um, preventing us from taking in new information that may change our opinion. I try to be conscious of that, but it's a challenge for sure. Here's what I'll leave us with because I got to get going. But so next week, hopefully, unless something crazy comes up like this whole Zelensky thing, and we have different thoughts on that. But I would like to talk about RFK more, kind of as the opposite of Trump and Musk, from a leadership and masculinity perspective. But one other thing, and I guess this is more of a political thing, but it goes into the whole ownership and victim mentality. I believe that a lot of the people, some of the people, I don't know the number, that are really pissed about him, that have this strong opinion, negative opinion about him becoming the secretary of HHS. So when I look at those people that are super outspoken about that, in my own personal life, most of them are horrible examples of physical and or mental health. And I think what is going on is, let's say that he is successful in cleaning up the pharmaceutical, the medical, and the food industries, and he makes he basically is trying to get the country on an actual healthy approach to life from a holistic standpoint. Well, now, guess what happens? You don't have the ability to blame the system anymore when it comes to your lack of health. You have to take ownership. So if the food in this country is healthy and we are promoting things like exercise and getting outdoors and meditation and connection with spirituality, and we're making it more difficult for people to simply rely on prescription drugs that simply treat symptoms and don't actually treat the root cause, you have to take ownership, which again is a lot harder to do. And they're clinging on to that victim mentality. Well, as long as our food sucks and as long as they're prescribing me meds, I can play the victim and I can blame the system. So I think they're afraid. They don't even realize it. I don't think they even know that they're afraid, that it's like, oh fuck, like I'm actually going to have to like put in work to take care of myself, and I can't just point the finger at Pepsi and McDonald's and Pfizer and all of this other shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. That's a little bit more political, but it's still based on the ownership and victim mentalities the two sides of that coin. So, dude,
Yeah.
great conversation. I love it. I'm excited to head down to Houston and have a great day with Callie. So I hope you have a great weekend as well, brother.
You too.
Later, man.
All right. See ya.